What's up, everyone? Today we are talking injuries and more specifically injury identity and how to ditch it. This is a favourite topic for Phil and something that I've learned is has been a critical role in what's allowed me to recover from some of the worst injuries you could imagine. Hey everyone, in case we haven't met, my name's Rad Burmeister. I'm one of the co-founders of Unity Gym and co-creators of the UMS, the Unified Movement System, where we turn driven people into superhumans. And the way we get such astonishing results with our members is that we've created a program that has a balance between strength, flexibility, and fitness. It's very unique and very effective. If you want to know how we do it, grab one of the free blueprints, the strength blueprint, the flexibility blueprint, or the nutrition blueprint, giving away the key secrets to what it is that we do here. And also, if you're listening to the podcast or watching this on YouTube, jump over to Facebook and join our private Facebook group, UMS Movement Mastermind, where we go live to record these shows daily and answer your questions and provide free coaching as well. As always, well, not as always, but as most days, actually probably as always now that we're back at the gym, I'm joined by Phil White, our resident physiotherapist and all-round babyface.
Yeah, such babyface at the moment. Oh my God. But that's okay.
It's so funny when we shave our beards, how much younger we all look.
I know. It's definitely one to keep in my sleeve later when I, start to look a bit old and haggard suddenly.
Yeah. Whenever, I've got grey hairs in my beard now, so whenever I shave, I'm like, whoa, I look really young.
Oh, yeah.
So, how you doing, Phil?
Yeah, good. It's got a bit of something in my eye, so if the people watching live on the UMS Movement Mastermind group see me winking at Rad a lot, it's just quietly struggling over here. So, but doing well. Keen to talk about this.
Yeah. This is a topic that's near and dear to Phil's heart, and we're going to go through a couple of we've got a couple of discussion points here. We're going to be talking about being aware that the medical industry doesn't always understand what an injury identity is, and you need to understand it yourself. We're also going to talk about thinking positive and avoiding pigeonholing yourself as a compromised person. And we're also going to talk about how to use scans and imagery properly and the way that they're not always appropriate, which is something that I didn't understand until you helped me to get through it.
Yeah, big stuff. And I guess to start off with that first point, I think it can be, I guess, a bit of a delicate one to navigate, but with the way that I guess the private medical systems are set up in Australia for one is that it does sort of sometimes pay for people to put these identities on you and make you feel like you're maybe someone who they want you to keep coming back and keep paying them. So it is this funny one to sort of navigate, and you got to hope that everyone you're seeing has got your best interests in mind. But I think it's just such an important thing to give patients the power in these discussions, know what questions to ask, and understand how to go about it. So glad we're talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, Phil, you even personally have told us your experience at some physiotherapy clinics that have trained you in a way to try and tell you got to get people coming back and coming back, which really, whether that it's their intention to do this or not, it does create an injury identity in people. And whether certain professionals, practitioners, doctors, physiotherapists, whether they're intending to do this or not, it is definitely having this effect on some people, because we see the bad side of it when people come into the gym with what we call an injury identity, which is you ask them, let's go and do this, and they start to give you this whole reasons as to why they as an individual cannot do it because they're an injured person. And often it's from things that happened years and years and years ago. And it's a sad thing as a personal trainer. It's quite a sad thing to deal with. It's made me in the past tell people not to go and see certain physiotherapists, because I've had some really bad experiences where I've never met the physio, have no idea who they are, but what it did to our members' psychology, their belief in themselves, was really, really bad.
Yeah, just to be clear, not just physios. I think there's, chiros, doctors.
For sure. I just say that, I guess, because I've got members that have had more experience with physios.
Yeah, and not to say that with chronic injuries or that you should be doing absolutely every part of training. What we're talking about here is, basically scared of doing anything, because that's what we're really hoping to do here, is teach you what you can, do, and how you can shift your focus to keep kicking goals while, you might be working on regressing some movements in certain parts of your body. So
yeah. Let's frame this a little bit as well. So for those of you that don't know what we're talking about, an injury identity, what we're referring to is that when you start to identify yourself as an injured person. So, people say, hey, let's go and do this. And you say, no, I can't do that because I'm an injured person. And I want to put some perspective around my personal experience because it wasn't until I'd spent so much time with Phil that I started to realize that maybe I was a little bit of an exception with my ability to recover and train around, recover from and train around injuries. I didn't really realize that this was something that I was good at until Phil started pointing it out to me. But I've had, these are just the notable injuries, okay? I have had so many injuries that weren't noted because they were, just strains and tears or whatever that fixed themselves within several weeks or several months. But my notable injuries, when I was 20, I tore my Liz Frank ligament. It was a full tear, which is a ligament that holds the big toe onto the second toe, right up at the apex of the foot. So when you look down at your foot, it's the highest point of the foot. That was a tear that required surgery where I had to get a screw put in it. I was told by the surgeon that I would never be able to run, jump, do any of the things that I do now. That was when I was 20. I was also told I'd have arthritis by the time I was 30. I was told I had a 66% chance of developing arthritis. I wouldn't even know that I had that injury now. The only thing I've got is probably a loss of about 5% of mobility in that ankle on that foot. So that was my first bad injury. The next bad injury I've had a spondylolisthesis in my back, which they couldn't tell me if it was a chronic injury or an acute injury because the symptoms came on acutely when I was in the army when I had a fall down a 10-foot ravine and I got x-rays and spondylolisthesis and a pars defect. Either way, it crippled me for a long time.
That's in your spine.
That's in my spine, yeah, L4 and L5. That's a back injury. It's caused me a lot of problem, a lot of chronic back pain that caused us to develop a program that was largely revolved for me around making that back pain better. Now I'm 42, so that was when I was 32 that I got diagnosed with that. I'm 42 now and I feel better than I did 10 years ago by a long shot. Then I tore my medial meniscus on my right leg. That had to be rehabilitated as well. And now I'm squatting with zero pain, zero issues. The only thing that I have to really avoid now is internal rotation of the hip, which we've spoken about that before. I've had golfer's elbow and tennis elbow, or medial and lateral epicondylitis, or tendinopathy, whatever you want to call it, Phil's favourite subject. They both stopped me from training for about 9 months, doing the things that I wanted to do. I shouldn't say stop me training, I should say stop me doing pulling exercises and certain exercises that aggravated that to the level I wanted to. And more recently, I've had a slap tear in my right shoulder and a torn supraspinatus and some fluid in the bursa. Which caused me, again, to reevaluate how I did things. Now, what I can tell you right now is that any one of those injuries, any one of them, I've seen them end people in the past. I've seen people get any one of those injuries and that was it for them. Their days of training the way that they wanted to were over and they developed what we call an injury identity, but not me. And the reason why I didn't is because I have a strong desire to succeed, and this is my own belief, my desire to succeed outweighs my desire to want to be a victim. And I just made the decision. I can put down my rehabilitation, my successful rehabilitation and all these injuries to one thing. I decided that I was going to rehabilitate myself.
Yeah. And for those folks out there who have had, similar situations and that stopped them, it may not be a lack of desire, but it is like when you have people telling you that you can't do certain things and that it's dangerous and that you'll have arthritis by it's totally understandable if health professionals are telling you this to believe them. I like to think that people should generally believe, that medical fraternities, because they do a lot of training to figure out what's what, and I really think you should take the judgment on board. But it's just when you have situations like this where maybe you should be probing a few more questions, maybe getting some second opinions. But yeah, I totally understand if it's not just a lack of desire, but you're just believing what people say and you go along with it. So
absolutely. And of course I agree with Phil. I am by no means am I saying don't listen to the medical professionals, because those are the people that know more than you, and unless you're trained formally yourself, then you are that's your best bet. You know, you do want to listen to the people that are educated and that understand how to deal with these things. But my personal belief is there needs to be a level of self-exploration, and a level of self-exploration, in my experience, it goes above and beyond what most people seem to think is enough or is necessary. Like for me, when I've had these injuries, I would go and ask somebody as much as I could get, and then when I felt like I got to a point where I didn't like what they were telling me, I'd ask somebody else, and then I'd ask somebody else. And I'm talking physiotherapists, chiropractors, people that are far more educated than me. You know, people like you, Phil, people like Leroy, people like Tom down the road, Tom Cartwright, and I would piece the pieces of the puzzle together to get an understanding of, like, the injury that pops to mind is my meniscus tear, where what I was basically told was, this is what you shouldn't do in order to make sure that your meniscus has the best chance of repairing, which is hard to do because it gets very low circulation. And then from understanding that, it was like, okay, well, if I can't do that, can I do this? And my answer was, yes, you can do that. Can I do this? Yes, you can do that. And so then I just created a plan around that, and 8 months later I was squatting again.
Yeah, and I think that's like that part of that sort of thinking, trying to stay positive about these things, and figuring out what it is that you can do is such a key part of getting past injuries. And I think if you it may even be that you've kind of got to just like settle in and do some of the boring, some of the more boring rehab stuff. But you can be, if you've got a knee injury, really focusing on kicking goals in your upper body. You can be, working on, some calisthenics upper body stuff, and you can kind of have that positive, like, association with training while still doing, just getting past the other injuries. So I think it's just, like keeping positive and trying to, and I guess it can kind of, by kicking goals in other areas of your body, it also just helps you stay away from developing that identity in the first place, because you still feel like, hey, I'm progressing and moving forward.
And I think that's a really good transition for us to move into the second point for today, which is to keep a positive mindset, and really believe in yourself, and believe that you are going to come out of this. I really believe that the first step to success is belief. It's believing that you're deserving of the success, and that can be financial success, career success, relationship success, just happiness and well-being in life. But in this case, recovering from this injury and getting back to a level that you can be happy with. And for me, like, I remember a really big thing for me was when I did my meniscus, I was trying to force adaptation in areas of my body that I now don't care about. Back then, it was really important to me. I was trying to achieve certain things because I thought that was important to me. And then when I tore this meniscus, I was like, wow, I've done some real damage to my knee here, and I need to reevaluate, is it worthwhile me pursuing this? And what I was pursuing was hip internal rotation, increasing that. And when I looked into it a bit and had a chat to you about it, I just decided, wow, this isn't worth it. I'm not really going to get much out of it, and I've done a bad injury. And then the other thing, what was a bigger blow for me was, one of the big things I was told about preventing the meniscus from getting worse, at least in the early stages, was to avoid high impact. And back then I was doing a lot of acrobatic movements as well. And I just made the decision. I decided, so I actually just pulled out my MRI before. It was in 2018, so it was 2 years ago that I did the injury. And I just decided, look, you know what, I'm 40. Do I really need to be doing acrobatics at my age? Are there other ways that I can get fulfillment out of my training? And the answer for me was yes, there's so much that I could do.
And just be clear, like, if you do have an injury like that and it takes a little time to heal, like, there's no reason why you can't bring back in higher impact stuff. It's just got to be done in a gradual sort of way. But yeah, when you were sort of thinking about what excites you and makes you happy, then maybe that was less of a important thing.
Well, I'm running now, and that's my high impact, because I believe that it is really important to try to include some high impact training.
High impact is so key for giving you a stimulus for your bones to stay dense and even for your cartilage with the right amount of impact is like, that's what helps it sort of regenerate, grow, and everything.
So I think that's a really important point for people to really wrap their head around, that we like to talk about, which is to think positive and avoid pigeonholing yourself. And Phil, this last point is really
just on that one, just from my own personal experience, because I think, it's part of me becoming a physio was by basically being like the injured guy whenever I played I played high level ultimate frisbee was my sport. If you don't know what that is, I'd recommend looking on YouTube after this. But I was kind of always that guy, and it was one of those things where people put the injury identity on me by always like being like, oh, what have you done this time, blah, blah, blah. Like, and it really got to me after a while where I was just like, like I didn't want it, but people were putting it on me, and that's what I think. The ways that you can kind of be resistant to that is by staying positive in what you're doing. So an example is when I was 18, I was the captain of the Australian team, and I was sort of with ultimate frisbee, you have like a kind of quarterback position, which is the one who does the big throws and the kind of big plays, and that was my position on the team. And then I broke my right index finger, which is basically like your throwing finger. So going into this World Championships where I was captaining the team in like 3 months away, I suddenly had a broken finger and couldn't do the one thing on the field that I was meant to do. And it really, got to me as because everyone had totally just, that was kind of my identity on the team was now replaced with an injured identity. So what I did was just learn to throw left-handed, and I practiced and practiced and practiced. And I got to the point where I could throw further on my left hand than anyone else on the team. And then my finger came good. I had to like strap it to the other one by the time the tournament came around. But from learning how to throw with my non-dominant hand, I'd actually had this like kind of you get this great sort of brain rewiring of learning how to do skills where by doing it on a non-dominant hand, you really get this great transfer. And so I came back and I was even better at throwing my right hand, and then that made me like a fairly handy sort of player, and I was able to like get through that tournament and do really well. And now I could do both hands. So so it's kind of that like by really trying to like finding something else to be positive about while you're in that sort of injured place where you can be progressing on something else, really kicking goals. It can help you like not only from yourself but from other people, kind of not being like that injured guy if you're able to keep progressing. So.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've got this similar experiences, when I have had some of these really bad injuries, if you come into the gym and watch me train, you wouldn't know that I'm injured because I still train for hours every day, and I'm still training at a high level. But because I have such a rich exercise vocabulary, and I know how to avoid making certain issues worse because I'm a professional trainer. I'm able to quickly formulate a program and a plan that allows me to work around my injuries. And I've had similar stories where I've gone, okay, well, my shoulder's stuffed right now and all I can do are these dicky little rehab exercises for the next 6 months. So let's think of what I can do. And I can still work my grip, I can work my forearms, I can do my elbows. So let's double down on that. And I can still do everything with my lower body and my spine. So let's focus on spine, let's focus on lower body, on flexibility, on this. And I've had some of my biggest, I wouldn't even say some of my biggest, all of my biggest breakthroughs in my training, every single one of them began with an injury. It was when I injured myself that it gave me the insight to say, wow, there's something going on in my body or in the way that I'm training that caused this injury. Let's try to get inside that, analyze it, and make changes. And on the back end of that, the biggest breakthroughs, the biggest strength development breakthroughs, the biggest flexibility breakthroughs, the biggest understanding of how to put a good program and a good workout together, it all came from those injuries. And personally, my experience, when I don't have those injuries, I don't get challenged. I don't think outside the box. I just sort of keep going along with business as usual, So there's a lot of opportunity, in having an injury like that. And the last point, Phil, this is definitely something that I'm not going to have a lot to say on here. This is really your jam, which is how to use scans and imagery effectively, and how to not when to take it with a grain of salt. And I think for me, definitely, before you told me this was something that I thought, okay, there's a scan. That scan's going to tell me everything I need to know. Or when I got to the point where I was like, all right, I'm going to go and get an MRI now. That MRI, that was it. That was going to tell me exactly what I want. And that's not always true. Is that right, Phil?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one that's like kind of, I guess the understanding and the use of scans has really changed over, the last, like particularly in the last sort of 10 years as, more and more research kind of goes into their efficacy and usefulness. And it might seem quite sort of strange because you feel like if you look at a thing and you see like a change there that shouldn't be there, that that's going to be the thing that's wrong, and that's the source of the pain. But if anyone has listened to, me discuss pain science at length before, pain is 100% an output of your brain, and it's very much to do with the information that you get from your peripheral system, so your arms, legs, the rest of your body, your torso, and then that is then processed as a pain output. So it's not just like if you have a certain amount of damage in one place, you're going to get exactly that amount of pain experience. So the reason why that's important is that often when you, if you get a scan, if you have had maybe a slight disc bulge for that is shown in your scan, it's not, you kind of don't know necessarily if that was the thing that started causing your back pain 2 weeks ago, or if it's quite likely that disc bulge could have been there for the last 3 years and you had no idea it's there. Or, an example would be, if you have an acute injury and then you, say with your shoulder, for example, maybe that slap tear could have actually been there for a long time. It could have come on chronically, but it was that supraspinatus and the bursa that's now actually the source of your pain. So it's kind of one of those things where, because we don't have a 360 degree, a constant sort of timeline of, when you have a certain thing, then it's not always useful, and sometimes you can be really hell bent on, treating that certain thing, or they use imaging to, direct surgery, and they go and, repair a thing that was seen as damaged in the imagery. But the person's pain doesn't change because that's not actually the overall driver of pain. And, the driver of pain, is a whole lot more complex than just, here's a thing that is seen on the imagery. So, and Yanni's coming here on the comment saying that imagery can contribute to injury identity, and I totally agree with that, where, even just with, so your slap tear example, slap tear, bursa, and supraspinatus, that's something that you can, they're words that you wouldn't have really known before you had this, but now you can rattle them off, and you, because it's so sort of ingrained, this is in me, this is what's causing me, my change in training, this is these words that are a bit kind of mysterious and a bit scary, become really ingrained in your brain, because you're oh shit, that's what's going on in there, which, the bursa always has fluid in it. So these things that you see written down in a report suddenly become really intimidating, really threatening. And if we remember what causes pain, it's our perceived threat of the actual, it's your body's perceived threat of the stimulus. So if you kind of have this imaging report that says all this stuff, and you've seen that, you've got changes in the level of cartilage in your knee, or the space between the vertebrae in your spine, that suddenly becomes really threatening, even though it's quite a regular part of aging. So that's just how it can really start to contribute to your identity. Yeah,
for sure. So you're quite a big believer that imagery is a last resort, is that correct?
Not necessarily. There are very appropriate times to use it. So when I, every time I see someone as a physio patient, I always go through some screening questions, which basically are trying to pick up whether or not there's sort of certain conditions that may be going on. So if someone has cancer, and has a tumor in their spine, then imaging is very useful very early to identify that and, and get appropriate treatment. But I'm not going to send everyone off for imaging to see if they might have that. What we get that information from is by asking certain questions about, pain at night, night sweats, losing lots, uncontrollable weight loss, all the history. So all these other questions that when you go see a health professional, you might be a bit frustrated that you spend half an hour chatting, but it's really important to understand all this stuff so that we know when to go and, use imaging appropriately. So by all means, I'm not saying that imaging is, terrible, but if you don't have a good reason to do it, it often is not that useful. It should be generally more confirmatory rather than investigative.
So Lee Clements has said some people used to try to project their aging injuries / limitations onto me. They've learnt not to include me now. That's awesome, Love Lee. It. I can relate to that as well. I've had people look at some of the things I do and say to me, "Whoa, watch out with that, man! You'll hurt yourself." And I look at them and think, "What? What do you mean? You might hurt yourself if you do it." But I've worked for decades to be able to do this effortlessly. It's really funny. Same thing. Sometimes we get people ragging on some of our posts that we do on social media. The biggest one without a doubt, the one that gets the most flack is whenever I post anything with loaded forward flexion, like a Jefferson curl, which is a controversial topic. There are experts that are way more educated and have far more credibility than I do that will say that loaded flexion is really, really bad. Stuart McGill has been, as far to my knowledge, somebody that's been quite vocal about that. And people say, how could you post something like that? Like, people could, really do themselves serious harm if they try that movement. And well, yeah, they could. But I say, my response is, so in the same vein, should a gymnast not post a photo of them doing a handstand? Because a handstand, if the wrong person tried to do that, they can seriously mess themselves up. But when you post something like this, you're trying to inspire people. You're trying to show people what could be done. You're trying to show people what it is that you do. You're not saying, hey, anybody go and try this. It's going to be good for you. And I find it, like Lee, in the vein of what you've said, I can totally relate. It's so funny how some people try to project what's going on in them onto you and onto other people. And yeah, it's an unfortunate way to be approaching things, I think.
Yeah, I think just to kind of sum this all up, like, I really love the term anti-fragile, which is one that Nassim Taleb, if you have a look at, he's written a book called Anti-Fragile, which is basically the idea of, the opposite of fragile. People often kind of think of as like robust. So if you had a glass that you dropped on the floor, it would shatter. But if you had, like a dense plastic one, it won't shatter. So that seems like it's the opposite. It's there. But what anti-fragile is actually when you give it the right amount of damage, that it actually makes it stronger. So and that's how the human body works. If you give it the right amount of stress, then it won't break. It'll get stronger and stronger and stronger. But it's just about finding that right entry point and that right sort of place to start when you've got an injury. And then if you give it the right amount of stress, you'll keep getting stronger. And it doesn't matter how old you are. Like, you're doing stuff that much younger people couldn't do because you've conditioned your body.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Absolutely. So hope we gave you guys some insight there into the concept of injury identity and freeing yourself from it. We're going to be talking about injury rehabilitation actually, what we're going to be talking about tomorrow is the concept of calling things regressions, not rehab, which is, again, it's another concept that Phil introduced us to. So tune in tomorrow if you want to know what we mean by that, because this is a really, really big part of not adopting this injury identity, is to look at your training as just a regressed way of training rather than you're in a rehabilitation phase of training. And it's something that, again, is near and dear to Phil's heart and is a really, really valuable concept to understand. So thanks for tuning in today, everyone. Thanks for the engagement, and we will see you tomorrow.
Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, it's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that
It's
far.
the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.